I think one of the biggest challenge is definitely lack of knowledge in this area and the confidence they have around some of the topics, which can be sensitive in terms of how you communicate them. And the fear is real with a lot of communication professionals. You know, they don't want to get it wrong. They've seen in the last few years that people who have made some grand statement being called out for, you know, their behaviors not really representing the kind of the text, I suppose, they're writing in their statements. And people are worried, you know, they're scared, and they often I'm approached about, oh, we've got a bit of a sensitive issue and I'm not quite sure how to address it, and I'm scared of saying the wrong words or using wrong terminologies. And the thing is, Amanda, as you know, in our world of communication, language evolves all the time. So what would have been okay to say maybe 5 years ago, or accepted 5 years ago, maybe not okay to say, but it was accepted, is no longer allowed. You know, people are really kind of shutting you down if you say those kind of words anymore. And people haven't moved on as quickly because it's not, you know, I always say to people that if you're not the one who's being discriminated against because you're part of the majority, then you don't see it. You don't see the challenges facing underrepresented minorities or underrepresented people because you just don't recognize it in yourself because you've not experienced it through your lived experience. That isn't your fault, you know, and this is what I want to be very clear on. But what we should be doing as communication professionals, because we serve a range of publics with different, you know, backgrounds and lived experiences from and diverse backgrounds at that, is that we should be making it our business to understand the publics that we're serving and the challenges that they're facing, so we can make sure that our comms is reflexive of that. And that's where we can sometimes be a bit lazy at times. And laziness in terms of because you just don't have the time, the budget, or whatever, but it can be lazy in how we communicate sometimes when it comes to EDI.
And when people are under pressure, when they've got an issue or a crisis or something's emerged, does this situation get worse?
Yeah, you forget everything in a crisis, right? Panic sets in, your heart's racing, you've got a metallic taste in your mouth. People are asking you loads of questions that you're just a bit like, oh my God, I don't know. Which is why, you know, and I know you're a champion of this, is like, you know, preparation is everything. You know, doing the crisis comms plan before the crisis happens, doing, you know, the kind of the sitting down with your team and a wide range of representation as well when you're doing your crisis mapping in terms of what have we missed. And often what happens sometimes with crisis planning, you know, and I am a huge advocate of making sure that you have your plan in place before the crisis, because you just can't work in a crisis if you don't have a plan. It's impossible, and you will mess things up. But when you're doing the crisis planning beforehand and doing a crisis strategy, looking around the room and making sure that you've got representation in the room and you've got different voices in the room as well, not only the comms team, but wider than that. And even if your comms team isn't representative, then making sure that you bring those voices into the room or into the conversation and sharing the plan as wide as you can to make sure that you're covering all areas. And I think one of the key areas that we can often forget is definitely around neurodiversity. You know, sometimes, you know, most comms people tend to work with words a lot and have a grasp of English in a really good way, and we can often be our worst enemies at times. And we don't often consider that some of the challenges facing people from, you know, who are neurodiverse and may need additional support. And I always say that if you can, you know, address our comms to the minority, the majority will always benefit. And if you don't understand what this could look like, then bring those people into the conversation. Does this make sense? Are we being a bit too woolly with this kind of statement? This is, you know, what is it, what we're trying to achieve here? Do you understand what we're trying to say to you if we were to put this statement out? You know, is it clear? Is it concise? Is it adding value? Those are the kind of questions that we need to be asking people. And we, in a crisis, you just don't have the time, number one, to do that properly and effectively. You are, like you said at the start, panicked, worried. Normally it's a crisis for some reason tends to happen like a ridiculous hour of the morning. So you're often trying to just gather your thoughts as a comms professional about what time is it, where am I, what am I doing, where's everything saved? You know, all of that kind of tends to happen at hours that we're just not normally functioning as well as we'd like to. So having everything prepared and planned and understood before anything happens is key. And recognizing people whose English may not be their second language, recognizing the fact that, some of the words that we use may not be understood just generally. The average reading age in the UK is 11, I think. Those kind of things that is really important. People don't have computers. We make assumptions that people have laptops and things like that. So if you're asking them to fill in a form, if you're asking them to tweet out, recognize that people don't have that. So what are you doing for that population, and what are your plans for that? Those who may not have the privileges to have minutes on their data plan, and they may need to go on, those kind of things is what we need to understand. But like I said right at the start of the conversation, it's not your fault that you may not know this, but we need to make sure that we're bringing in the people that may know this and being aware of that we have to ask the right questions. Number one tip is broaden your horizons more. So look outside your echo chambers and information bubbles. When I did this a few years ago, probably about 5 years ago now, I recognized that I didn't have a diverse range of people that I communicated with. I just didn't. So I made the intentional effort to connect, make friends, go out, networking, that kind of stuff, just so I have people in my network that I can learn from on a regular basis. And as smart as we can be at times, and the number of CPD that we might do and all that, it's nice to learn from other people as well as their experiences and understanding what challenges they may go through. Second tip is preparation. We kind of hinted on this throughout the conversation today, but if you don't have a crisis comms plan in place, then make sure you do. Like, that is number one, and make sure that you're covering all areas of equity, diversity, and inclusion in terms of the channels that you're using to communicate, the spokesperson that you're going to have to communicate, the support that they may need. Have it all written down and the process written down. So when the crisis hits, you're prepared. You know exactly who you need to speak to, you know exactly what you need to do. And that's going to help you kind of do things properly and make sure that people are included. And that's the best thing you can do, I think, in terms of preparing yourself, because you can address the gaps early on. So when you're doing your comms plan, your crisis comms plan, you can see the gaps when your mind is a bit clearer, then you can plug them. When you're in the crisis and you try and do a plan, you can't, because you're working at such pace. So that's my second tip. And the third tip I would say is, don't fear asking questions around, I don't know how to, questions, or being honest and vulnerable to say, I don't know how to do this, and making sure that we're being, inclusive. So can somebody help me understand this? Like, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to bring people into the conversation. It's okay to reach out to others and say, look, I've got this plan. I feel like there's gaps in this plan. Could you be able to help me understand where these gaps are? Because I want to get it right. And we don't tend to do that as frequently as we should. We kind of think, oh, I can do it. It's fine. I don't need help. It's almost this kind of, if I ask for help, then people think that I'm not good at my job. And if I'm not good at my job, then what am I doing here? And that imposter kind of inner critic kind of comes into that. So really, I always say the most kind of people who are in tune with equity, diversity, and inclusion are the ones who are curious, who ask the questions, who get to know communities, and who are not in fear of saying, I don't want to get this wrong, or I have got it wrong in the past and I want to get it right. So can you help me learn? And I think that's what I would say would be your kind of third tip for anyone. Well, I would just say, like I said, around, being okay to speak up about the kind of stuff that you're seeing, and building yourself a community where you can share this information from. So, Priya and I host an event every year where we try and encourage communication professionals and PR professionals come along to hear stories about crises that have happened in the past and how it's been dealt with. We're writing a book, as we kind of hinted at the start, which will be out in June, which is around specifically around building inclusive cultures for and how communication professionals can help do that. Because as I said offline before, a lot of communication professionals I come across feel like it's not their job. We're not here to do that. We're here to do this. And I'm like, it's everyone's job to make sure that people are included and they belong. And part of that is through the communication, whether that's verbal or non-verbal. And as communication professionals, we are the experts in that space. So we should be able to guide and support our leaders. Even if we may not be as knowledgeable in that particular area, we can definitely be curious enough to know when we need to get that help and ask the questions. And we know intuitively that something isn't right. So we should be able to speak up. And if you don't speak up, then you're not doing yourself justice, to be honest, or the person or the organization that it works with. So I would, the final kind of thought is, don't fear speaking up. I know it's hard. I know it can be difficult. I know it can be challenging. You're scared of looking a bit silly, but you'll be surprised of how many other people were thinking the same thing, but just couldn't find the words to say it because they were worried. And as communication professionals, I see ourselves as slightly disconnected from the work. I see us as lawyers, like a lawyer, I would say, but more for communication. So we have to have an objective view, in essence, to kind of advise and guide in the right way and not fear it, because at the end of the day, we're doing our job right and want to do our job well.